Saint Frances Xavier Cabrini was born in 1850 in the small town of Sant'Angelo Lodigiano in northern Italy, in a world marked by political instability, rural poverty, and profound social transformations. From the beginning, her life is crossed by fragility. She is born prematurely, with delicate health, and spends her childhood battling illnesses that often brought her to the brink of death. In human eyes, everything pointed to a short and limited existence, but God saw in that fragile body a soul of steel, prepared for works that would cross borders, oceans, and continents. From early on, Frances's life reveals itself as a paradox between weakness and strength. Still a child, Frances shows a vivid imagination and an uncommon spiritual sensitivity. While other girls played with dolls or took care of small domestic tasks, she was enchanted by stories of missionaries who crossed seas to bring the gospel to distant lands. The name Xavier, inspired by St. Frances Xavier, already indicated the deep desire for mission burning in her heart. Even without fully understanding the scope of that call, she felt that her life did not belong to her, but was reserved for something greater. The early loss of her parents profoundly marks her spiritual journey. Orphaned while still young, Frances learns early to trust only in God as her true father. This experience of human abandonment does not produce revolt, but a trusting abandonment to providence. The loneliness of childhood matures her faith and strengthens her inner conviction that God never fails, even when everything seems to collapse. This absolute trust would become the foundation of all her future decisions. From her youth, Frances desires to consecrate herself entirely to God in religious life. However, her fragile health becomes a constant obstacle. Various congregations refuse her admission, considering her physically incapable of an active life. Each refusal could have been the end of the dream, but for her it becomes a test of perseverance. Where others saw limits, she saw challenges to be placed in the hands of the divine will. While waiting for a door that seems never to open, Frances dedicates herself to teaching and to caring for the poor and the sick. In humble schools and environments marked by misery, she learns in practice that charity is not an abstract ideal, but a concrete, demanding, and often silent service. Her gaze turns especially to those whom no one wants to see, anticipating the mission she would later embrace with radicality. Frances's spirituality grows deeply rooted in the Eucharist and in filial trust in Our Lady. She spends long moments in prayer, asking not for ease, but for clarity to fulfill God's will. Her heart does not seek human security, but only fidelity. It is in this interior school that her missionary soul is formed, far from applause and recognition. Even in the face of physical limitations, Frances develops a surprising inner energy. Her determination, her capacity for organization, and her natural leadership begin to manifest themselves. Those who live with her perceive that there is something extraordinary in that young woman who appears so fragile. Her strength does not come from the body, but from the certainty that God calls her and sustains her. The refusal of the congregations does not extinguish her desire for consecration, but purifies it. Frances learns that vocation is not a comfortable path, but an obedient response, often marked by waiting, silence, and trial. She understands that if God desires something, He Himself will open the way, even if it seems impossible in human eyes. This first stage of her life reveals a saint in formation, shaped by pain, by waiting, and by trust. Nothing is wasted. Each illness, each loss, and each closed door prepares Frances for a mission that will require superhuman courage and unshakable faith. God is silently building a work that will cross oceans. Thus, before being a missionary to the world, St. Frances Xavier Cabrini learns to be a missionary of the cross itself. It is on this hidden ground, marked by tears and prayer, that one of the greatest missionary women in the history of the Church is born. Frances's missionary desire does not fade with time. On the contrary, it matures and becomes clearer. Faced with the impossibility of entering an already existing congregation, the bold idea arises of founding a new religious family. Not out of personal ambition, but out of obedience to a persistent interior call that gives her no rest. She understands that God not only calls her to serve, but to begin something new, even without resources, without support, and without human guarantees. In 1880, the Institute of the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus is born. The choice of the Sacred Heart is not accidental. It represents the limitless, sacrificial, and missionary love of Christ. Frances desires that her sisters be a reflection of this love in the world, especially among the most forgotten. From the beginning, the congregation is born poor, small, and fragile, like its foundress, yet sustained by an ardent faith. The first years are marked by extreme difficulties. Money is lacking, structures are lacking, and criticism abounds. Many doubt the viability of the work and Frances's capacity as a leader. Nevertheless, she governs with firmness and gentleness, combining discipline with profound charity. Her authority does not arise from power, but from example and spiritual conviction. Community life is demanding. Frances insists on fidelity to prayer, obedience, and sacramental life, even amid intense work. She knows that without deep roots in God, the mission would become mere activism. Her vision is clear: first holiness, then action. This balance would become a distinctive mark of the congregation. The missionary spirit that animates the Institute goes beyond the borders of Italy. From the beginning, Frances forms her sisters with their eyes turned toward the world. She speaks of distant lands, of forgotten peoples, and of souls thirsty for hope. Even without having crossed the ocean at that moment, her heart already lives overseas. The sisters learn from her that mission requires sacrifice. There is no room for complacency or excessive attachment to one's own will. Frances teaches that to love the Sacred Heart of Jesus means to accept the cross and to serve where it is most necessary. This strong spirituality attracts young women willing to give everything for Christ. Despite financial limitations, the congregation grows. Schools and works of charity begin to arise, always directed to the poorest. Frances demonstrates an impressive administrative ability, knowing how to deal with civil and ecclesiastical authorities without losing humility. Her faith does not exclude practical intelligence. On the contrary, it illumines it. Each new foundation is accompanied by trials. Illnesses, misunderstandings, and persecutions are not rare. Even so, Frances remains firm, convinced that the work is not hers but God's. This certainty gives her a serenity that impresses even the most skeptical. Obedience to the Church is a central pillar of her mission. Frances never acts on her own, but always seeks discernment and ecclesial approval. This fidelity to the magisterium guarantees the congregation's spiritual solidity and protection against deviations. Her mission is profoundly Catholic, rooted in the tradition of the Church. Thus, the Institute of the Missionary Sisters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus is born small in the eyes of the world, but great in the plan of God. It is the beginning of a work that will bring hope to millions, guided by a woman who trusts heaven more than any human resource. When everything indicated that Frances's mission would remain restricted to Europe, God surprises once again. The possibility arises of departing for China, an old dream of her missionary heart. However, divine providence had other plans. Pope Leo XIII, upon hearing her, pronounces words that would change her life: not to the east, but to the west. This unexpected direction reveals the prophetic gaze of the Church in the face of an urgent need. The destination indicated is the United States, a land of opportunities, but also of profound suffering for thousands of Italian immigrants. Poor, discriminated against, exploited, and often spiritually abandoned, these immigrants lived on the margins of society. The church needed someone willing to face this harsh reality, and Frances accepts without hesitation, even without knowing what awaited her. The journey is long, tiring, and risky, especially for someone with such fragile health. Upon disembarking in New York, Frances encounters a reality even harsher than she had imagined. Support is lacking, money is lacking, and even local ecclesiastical authorities show resistance to her presence. Everything seems to confirm that such a mission would be impossible. Instead of becoming discouraged, Frances acts. With faith and courage, she begins to seek resources, dialogue with authorities, and organize her sisters. Her determination is impressive. She does not wait for ideal conditions, but creates possibilities where there had only been obstacles. Her trust in God is translated into concrete and bold action. The first projects are directed toward education and the care of orphans. Schools and orphanages arise amid precariousness, offering not only instruction, but dignity and hope. Frances understands that to evangelize is also to restore the wounded humanity of those whom the world has forgotten. The initial hostility does not disappear easily. Prejudice against immigrants and suspicion toward religious women are constant. Even so, Frances faces everything with serenity and firmness. She does not respond with aggressiveness, but with silent perseverance, letting the works speak for themselves. Her leadership grows stronger amid difficulties. The sisters see in her a living example of courage and abandonment to providence. Even when everything seems to collapse, Frances keeps her eyes fixed on Christ. Her faith does not ignore reality, but transforms it. The mission in the United States expands rapidly. Other cities begin to receive the missionary sisters of the Sacred Heart. Hospitals, schools, and charitable institutions multiply, serving not only Italians, but people of diverse origins. The mission becomes universal, reflecting the borderless love of the heart of Jesus. Frances travels tirelessly, crossing the country many times. Her health, far from improving, grows even weaker, but her soul remains firm. Each journey, each foundation, is lived as an act of total self-giving, even at the cost of her own life. Thus, that fragile young woman from Italy becomes the spiritual mother of thousands of immigrants. The New World becomes the missionary field where her holiness fully blossoms, showing that when God calls, He also sustains. The mission of St. Frances Xavier Cabrini in the United States quickly takes on a profoundly maternal character. She does not limit herself to administering works. She becomes personally involved with the suffering of the people. For Italian immigrants, she becomes a mother, counselor, defender, and consoling presence amid hostility and abandonment. Her capacity to love concretely marks every aspect of her mission. Frances realizes that many immigrants lose not only material stability, but also their faith. Far from their land, culture, and religious traditions, many feel spiritually orphaned. She understands that preserving the faith is as urgent as offering bread and shelter. For this reason, she insists on religious formation, catechesis, and sacramental life. The founding of hospitals becomes one of the strongest hallmarks of her mission. In a time when access to healthcare was limited and exclusionary, especially for the poor, Frances confronts authorities and unjust systems to guarantee dignified care. Her hospitals are not merely medical centers, but places where Christian charity manifests itself in a concrete and visible way. Her relationship with civil and ecclesiastical authorities requires courage and wisdom. Many times, she must confront prejudices and resistance with firmness, without ever losing respect and obedience to the Church. Her balanced posture wins over even those who initially rejected her. Frances knows no rest. Her schedule is marked by constant travel, visits to communities, foundations of new works, and spiritual accompaniment of the sisters. Even when her body asks for rest, she moves forward, sustained by an interior strength that can only be explained by the grace of God. The formation of the religious sisters is a constant priority. Frances insists that her sisters be women of deep prayer, discipline, and missionary spirit. She knows that the work will survive only if it is sustained by souls deeply rooted in God. Her leadership is demanding, but always marked by charity. Love for the Sacred Heart of Jesus permeates the entire spirituality of the congregation. Frances teaches that this love must be lived concretely, especially in service to the poorest and most abandoned. It is not a sentimental devotion, but a radical commitment to the gospel. Even in the face of internal and external criticism, Frances remains firm. She understands that fidelity to the mission does not depend on human approval. Her security lies in the certainty that she is fulfilling God's will, even when this demands sacrifice and misunderstanding. Frances's spiritual motherhood goes beyond the limits of the congregation. Lay people, children, the sick, and immigrants see in her a safe refuge. Her presence conveys peace, firmness, and hope, even in the most difficult environments. Thus, St. Frances Xavier Cabrini reveals herself not only as a missionary, but as the spiritual mother of a wounded people, showing that true mission is born from love that gives itself without measure. Despite the impressive growth of the work, Frances's health progressively deteriorates. Chronic illnesses, extreme fatigue, and constant pain accompany her final years. For her, however, suffering is not an obstacle to the mission, but a way of deeper union with Christ crucified. She lives the cross not as defeat, but as a silent offering. Even debilitated, Frances refuses to abandon her responsibilities. She continues traveling, writing, guiding, and making important decisions for the congregation. Her ability to bear suffering with serenity impresses those around her. Her life becomes a living testimony of total abandonment to God's will. Prayer intensifies even more during this period. The Eucharist is her greatest strength, and the Sacred Heart of Jesus her constant refuge. Frances understands that as the body weakens, the soul is called to a deeper degree of trust and surrender. The sisters realize they are accompanying the final steps of their foundress. She prepares the congregation to go forward without her physical presence, insisting on fidelity to the charism, to the church, and to the mission. Her concern is not with her own memory, but with the continuity of God's work. Suffering does not make her bitter or introspective. On the contrary, her charity becomes even more delicate. She cares about details, about the well-being of the sisters, and about the poor who continue to knock at the doors of the institutions. Her attention to others remains until the end. Frances faces death with Christian serenity. There is no fear, only surrender. Her whole life was a continual yes to God's will, and now that yes is brought to full completion, she prepares for the definitive encounter with the one she served tirelessly. On December 22, 1917, St. Frances Xavier Cabrini gives her soul to God. Her death occurs far from her native land, confirming that her mission was truly universal. She dies as she lived, in service, in obedience, and in love. News of her death spreads quickly, accompanied by demonstrations of gratitude and veneration. Those who were touched by her mission recognize that they have lost not only a leader, but a spiritual mother. The cross that marked her final years is transformed into glory in the eyes of faith. Her life proves that holiness does not consist in the absence of suffering, but in persevering fidelity amid it. Thus, Frances's death does not end her mission, but makes it eternal, preparing the way for the official recognition of her holiness by the Church. After her death, the reputation for holiness of Saint Frances Xavier Cabrini grows rapidly. Testimonies of graces, conversions, and miracles begin to emerge, especially among those who turn to her intercession with faith. Her life, marked by concrete works and sacrificial love, becomes a source of inspiration for thousands of the faithful. The Church, prudent and discerning, begins the process of beatification, carefully examining her life, virtues, and writings. Every detail confirms what the people already intuited. Frances lived the Christian virtues in a heroic manner. Her obedience, humility, charity, and trust in God stand out in an exceptional way. The miracles attributed to her intercession reinforce this recognition. Inexplicable healings and extraordinary graces are analyzed with scientific and theological rigor. The Church sees in these signs the divine confirmation of the holiness of her servant. In 1938, Frances is beatified, and in 1946 she is canonized by Pope Pius IX. She becomes the first citizen of the United States to be proclaimed a saint, even though she is of Italian origin. This fact highlights the universal character of her mission and her holiness. Canonization is not only a personal recognition, but also a confirmation of the value of the mission among migrants. The Church recognizes in Frances a model of active charity, deeply rooted in faith and in obedience to the magisterium. Her elevation to the altars inspires new generations of missionaries and committed lay people. Her life shows that holiness is possible even amid intense work, administrative difficulties, and social challenges. The congregation she founded continues to grow, carrying forward her charism in various countries. Schools, hospitals, and social works remain as living testimonies of her mission, touching lives far beyond the original context of Italian immigrants. Frances becomes the patroness of immigrants, a title that perfectly reflects her self-giving and her sensitivity to the pains of displacement and exclusion. Her intercession is sought by those who live far from their land and face difficulties in foreign lands. The Church's recognition does not make her story something distant, but makes it even closer to the faithful. Her life presents itself as a possible, concrete, and demanding path of fidelity to the gospel. Thus, from earth to the altar, Saint Frances Xavier Cabrini remains as a luminous sign that charity lived with faith can transform the world. The message of Saint Frances Xavier Cabrini remains extremely actual. In a world marked by forced migrations, humanitarian crises, and social exclusion, her life echoes as a call to Christian responsibility. She teaches that faith cannot be indifferent to human suffering, especially that of the most vulnerable. Her courage in the face of difficulties inspires those who feel small or incapable. Frances proves that it is not human resources that determine the reach of the mission, but trust in God and the willingness to obey. Her physical fragility was never an impediment to divine action. The spirituality of the Sacred Heart, lived concretely by Frances, invites the faithful to unite devotion and commitment. She shows that to love Christ implies loving concretely those whom he loves, especially the poor, the sick, and the forgotten. Her life also challenges the modern view of success. Frances did not seek recognition, comfort, or prestige. Her only criterion was fidelity to God's will. This evangelical radicalness confronts the spirit of the world and points to a path of true freedom. For lay people, Frances is an example of initiative, leadership, and courage in faith. For religious, she is a model of obedience, sacrifice, and missionary zeal. For all, she's a testimony that holiness is possible in any state of life. Her spiritual motherhood remains alive in her intercession before God. Many turn to her seeking help in life's difficulties, especially in situations of migration, illnesses, and family challenges. Her spiritual closeness remains real and effective. Saint Frances Xavier Cabrini reminds the Church of her universal mission. She crossed oceans not out of a desire for adventure, but out of love for souls. Her example invites every Christian to go beyond himself and to look beyond his own borders. In times of fear and closure, her life proclaims hope. Where the world sees threat, she sees an opportunity to love. Where there is rejection, she builds welcome. Where there is pain, she offers care. Thus, Saint Frances Xavier Cabrini remains as a saint of movement, courage, and active charity. Her life is a permanent invitation to radical trust in God and to love without borders. May her example continue to illuminate the Church and inspire hearts to live a living, concrete, and missionary faith today and always.